Alright, so I've got a Warlock build here that you can take into Legend Onslaught. The gameplay that you're going to see here is specifically Midtown. It is a 50 wave completion, so I was pretty happy about that. I was also top of the leaderboard for kills by quite a margin, and overall score. Not that that means a whole lot. You know, it is a team effort, obviously. If one of your teammates is doing a lot of crowd control, then, you know, they might not have a ton of kills, and so, you know, it doesn't really mean much, but it does indicate to a certain degree the relevancy of the build. So yeah, I was pretty happy with this build. And as you can see here, I'm on Strand, but this is not a Threadling build. I'm sure if you've been watching YouTube and watching people's builds, you've seen a ton of Threadling builds for Broodweaver. Ton of, obviously, Phoenix Protocol, you know, the most in-demand build for Legend Onslaught. And Warlock as well. I think, Stasis Warlock with the turrets, right? Very popular. I think my first Legend completion was with 2 other Stasis Warlocks, so it is very effective. But I wanted to do something a little bit different here, which, and in my opinion, this is just as effective as any other build. And this is obviously a Glaive build with Karnstein armlets. So the things that you're going to need to make this build work are you're going to need a Glaive for one, you're going to need Karnstein armlets for your exotic, and you're going to need Weaver's Trance for your aspect, right? Because Weaver's Trance with your Shackle Grenade, you'll be able to consume that Shackle Grenade, and then you've got Weaver's Trance for 30 seconds, I believe. Anything that you kill is going to emit a suspending burst, and this works with your Glaive. So you can just go around stabbing stuff. You're going to get benefits from Karnstein armlets, and you're going to get benefits from killing suspended targets, and all of this is going to work together to basically ensure your survivability and overall effectiveness with the build, right? So we are going to need some other options for our weapon choices specifically, because obviously with a Glaive you have limitations, right? You can't just head into a pack of exploder units and start stabbing, because you'll die. You can't take care of tormentors with a Glaive. You can't take care of the boss with a Glaive. You need ranged options, you need champion options, and yeah, right? So obviously for this round specifically, this was a Fallen, right? We're against Fallen here, so there's going to be overloads, which means that you do need an overload weapon. So Quicksilver Storm works very well. I know it was nerfed, but to me, like, Quicksilver Storm is just still very, very good. It was good before it got all of the buffs with the catalyst and everything before Lightfall. I know a lot of people are just saying, oh, it's, you know, been nerfed to the ground, but it really hasn't. You can still get 3 grenades in a single magazine, which is just nuts. Yeah, the grenades don't do as much area of effect, but you should be using the grenades for single target damage anyways, because you're really only going to proc the grenades prepped off of beefy targets that can withstand receiving like a whole mag of Quicksilver Storm, right? But either way, the important thing here is that it's an auto rifle. It has overload. So that is my overload option. Strand does not have anything in its kit for taking care of overloads. We can take care of barriers with unraveling rounds, which we can get for free from the seasonal artifact, and just by picking up an orb of power, which is very easy. Don't have to use threat of propagation or anything like that. And obviously we have suspend for unstoppables. Right, so, and I don't think there are any unstoppables because this is a Fallen mission specifically for this round of Onslaught. But yeah, if you're up against the Hive, then your suspend is going to come in handy for sure. And you'll notice here that I actually showed an Apotheosis Veil build after showing you the Karnstein's one, because it is beneficial to switch to a more effective build for boss DPS. I mean, you could totally switch subclasses and everything, and then just, you know, get your abilities back pretty fast when you go back into the waves. But I just keep all of the aspects and fragments the same. I only switched out the Threadling Grenade, or the Shackle, for a Threadling Grenade, and then Apotheosis Veil. what that does. As you can see right here, you pop your super, right? So ideally dump your abilities before you pop your super, because you're going to get all your abilities right back, and then you're going to be able to throw up to 5 grenades and like 5 or 8 arcane needles, because you get so many arcane needles with Broodweaver. But even if you're not on strand, you'll be able to spam like 5 melees and 5 grenades, which is very good. And you can kind of take your time with the boss fights anyways. You know, there's no damage scoreboard, so you don't really have to concern yourself with like being on top of the scoreboard for damage or anything like that. It's just survive, do some damage, and yeah, and so it just doesn't make much sense for me to run Karnstein armlets in the boss room, because I'm not going to be using the Glaive, right? It's just not practical. And so these highlights here, unfortunately, because Onslaught is so long, I didn't record the entire 50 round completion. I only got up to, I think, wave 14 or something like that. So I actually stitched in some clips from another video, or from another round where I was with a different fire team and we got a few waves done. So that's why you're seeing here I'm actually with different teammates than I am in the later clips. But that was kind of cool there, because we got the Tormentor round, and I didn't realize, but you actually get your abilities back very fast, and your super, almost as if you have like that strand empowerment buff from Neo Muna when the Tormentor spawns. So you like with Apotheosis Veil, it's just nutty. You can pop like 3-4 supers, you know, throw like 30 grenades, and yeah, so that was kind of fun. So just checking my notes here to see what else we've got. Other Glaive builds that you can use. I'll go more in depth, obviously, about, you know, this build, but I just want to cover some of the other things that you can do with Glaive builds. One of the things I contemplated was just using necrotic grips for the poison damage, and then like if I need to, you know, switch off my Glaive, I can use something like Osteostriga or Necrochasm and spread poison. And obviously with your melee hits with necrotic grips, you'll also spread poison, which is very tempting to use, but you know, Legend Onslaught, you really need to build into survivability. And honestly, even with Karnsteins, without the extra damage bump to your Glaive, you're still doing a ton of damage. Plenty enough to take out yellow bars, red bars. It's very, very effective. And keep in mind, Glaive is actually overcharged, right? We don't have elemental surges like we do in like Nightfalls and weekly campaign missions and stuff like that, which is a nice change. I'm glad they didn't do that, so you can actually use different subclasses in Onslaught and still be effective. So yeah, I mean, you can basically build into whatever weapons are surging, and so right now we've got Glaives and grenade launchers. So that's part of the inspiration for using a Glaive here, and part of why you're probably seeing other content creators making Glaive builds. So yeah, I contemplate necrotic grips. Winter's Guile is also an option, but I think it has more synergy with Stasis. I've never actually used it, but it's basically like Warlock's version of Worm God Caress. You can stack up to like triple, quadruple damage with your Glaive, which is just absolutely nuts. But again, it doesn't offer the survivability of Karnstein armlets. Other Glaives that you can use, which I also tested here. Originally, I went into it with Winterbite, because I haven't really used Winterbite, and I've seen people using it, and I thought it would be fun. And I didn't realize that, or I guess I forgot that there was a change made to Winterbite, that as long as you have ammo, you will apply slow just from the melee hits with the Glaive, which is absolutely nuts on Overload champions, and Unstoppables for that matter. Plus you've got the freezing projectile, which is kind of like a mini stasis turret. So yeah, you can, I mean, Winterbite is intrinsically Overload and Unstoppable, which is, you know, it's good. The problem is you're giving up your exotic slot for an exotic Glaive, and if you're going around stabbing stuff with a Glaive, do you really need it to be exotic? Winter's Bite is also kind of slow on the handling. It feels heavy, and you know, not it just doesn't feel as good to use as kind of just a normal legendary glaive. And giving up your heavy slot as well, right? So not just your exotic slot, but your heavy slot. And there's a lot of value to having something like a machine gun here to take care of the Tormentor's shoulders and his crit spots. And then for damage, you know, you can switch to like a rocket or a linear fusion or something like that. I also tried out Vexcalibur for a little while, and that was also very effective. I have another build planned out for Vexcalibur, so I'm not going to touch on that too much. But basically, you get free overshields with Vexcalibur, and that can play into a lot of different synergies with the Void subclass. So yeah, there's a little hint at what might be coming with Vexcalibur. But again, like, you're giving up your exotic slot for an exotic glaive. Not really that necessary, and honestly, you don't need the Void overshield here. You know, like I said, this is a 50 round 50 wave completion of Legend. No overshield needed. Karnstein Armlets gives you Cure ×3 and Restoration, right? Up to Restoration ×2 if you do a finisher, which is just nuts. But honestly, like, even if it didn't have Restoration, the Cure ×3 would probably be enough to ensure your survivability. There's also Edge of Intent, which I didn't really play around with in Onslaught, but it does interest me, especially for Solar, because Edge of Intent got a buff along with the other class-specific exotic glaives. But again, it's an exotic glaive, right? But it is nice that you can charge up a little healing turret to throw on the ground, which will heal your teammates. It'll give them Cure and Restoration, so kind of like Karnstein's. So it's actually a little bit redundant if you're using Karnstein's. And on top of that, you have to get projectile kills to charge up your turret, you know, efficiently. Which I'm not really focused on using the glaive projectile to kill. I'm only using it really to kind of weaken targets before I go in and stab them, or to proc close to melee. So yeah. So the nice thing with the legendary glaives like Judge of Kelgaroth here is that you can get close to melee. And I think Vexcalibur has close to melee as well, but all you need is a legendary glaive. Close to melee gives you, I can't remember how much extra damage, but it increases your melee glaive damage. I'm just going to look it up right now. Glaive projectile kills give you 30% increased glaive melee damage for 11 seconds, right? And the timer is refreshable. So anything that you kill with your glaive, you're just going to reset the timer to 11 seconds. Or I guess it's 12 seconds with enhanced close to melee, which is what I have on this. So that's 30% extra damage, right? So it's not like Syntheseps or Wormgod Caress, but it is a bit of extra damage, and it's noticeable. So as much as often I try to, before going into start stabbing stuff, get that projectile kill, get close to melee proc, then you don't have to worry about it again until you're just kind of like off the cooldown after you've completed a wave, and then you might need to reproc it on the next wave. Yeah, so those are some other options. Aspects and fragments here. Well, obviously you need Mind Spun Invocation and Weaver's Trance, right? With your Shackle Grenade, that's going to give you the ability to consume your Shackle Grenade, then you get 30 seconds of Weaver's Trance. This is like the bread and butter, you know, it's like the engine behind the build. You need the Glaive, you need Karnstein Armlets for your survivability, and you need Weaver's Trance, right? But if you're going to do any Glaive build on Broodweaver, I would say you absolutely need Weaver's Trance, because you could just go around suspending everything with your Glaive. It's like a chain reaction effect that suspends. So you get crowd control, anything that you're up in the middle of all the enemies, which means that it's quite dangerous. So being able to suspend them all like that is, it makes everything that much safer. I'm also using the Wanderer here, and that's basically just for additional suspends. So anything that I destroy my Tangle, it sends off another suspending burst. I can throw my Tangle like a Shackle Grenade at an enemy, which I do quite often, so that's kind of nice there. Not building into Threadlings at all, so I'm not even worried about that. Other fragments here, Thread of Wisdom and Thread of Warding are the other kind of key ingredients to the build. You need Thread of Wisdom is going to allow you to make orbs of power with your glaive, right? There's no siphon mods, there's no combat mods that you can put on your armor that are going to allow you to get orbs of power from glaive melee kills. I don't even think Reaper works with it. I'm not 100% sure, but like you can't use like Solar Siphon and expect to get orbs of power from stabbing stuff. You're just not. So you need to use fragments from your subclass. So like there's other fragments on other subclasses, like Spark of Amplitude if you're on Arc. But on Strand, we've got Thread of Wisdom. So defeating suspended targets creates orbs of power. There is a cooldown, unfortunately, so it's not like every kill is going to give you an orb, but you're going to get enough orbs to basically keep your build, your gameplay loop going. And so what are the orbs doing? I'm using Innervation, so I get grenade energy from those orbs. I get a little bit of healing from the orbs. And most importantly, we get Woven Mail because I'm using Thread of Warding. So Thread of Wisdom and Thread of Warding go hand in hand, right? I get up into the thick of things, I start killing enemies, stuff gets suspended, then they drop orbs of power for me, then I've got Woven Mail. So pretty much immediately with the gameplay loop, you go into battle and you're doing crowd control, and you're getting cure ×3, and you're getting restoration, and you're picking up orbs for extra healing and extra grenade energy, and you're getting Woven Mail, right? And I think in this run we actually had a Void Titan using Bastion, which was pretty cool considering we got 50 waves done with like off meta builds. And so a lot of the times here I had a Void Overshield on top of my Woven Mail and my restoration. So yeah, kind of a little preview at what Prismatic might be able to do. Other fragments, Thread of Generation and Continuity. So Thread of Generation I would absolutely use because you need your Weaver's Trance uptime, right? And I basically made this build so that I would be able to have back-to-back Weaver's Trance, more or less. And with all of the ability cooldown nerfs and combat mod nerfs that we've received lately, you kind of need every little bit of help you can get. So you absolutely need Thread of Generation. As you do take damage, you get grenade energy. And then I'm using Innervation. I'm using Explosive Finisher. And I'm using Melee Kickstart, or Grenade Kickstart. So I'm using like 3 different combat mods to get grenade energy, plus Thread of Generation, plus 100 Discipline, right? And so I can actually consume another Shackle Grenade before my Weaver's Trance is even expired, quite often, right? And then Thread of Continuity is so there's an optional fragment. I don't know if you saw from the intro there, but I was kind of going over some different fragments that you can swap out for Thread of Binding. Thread of Continuity, it will give you longer suspend durations, which is nice, but I don't think it's super necessary because you're suspending stuff so often that you can just reproc the suspend immediately if enemies become unsuspended. Thread of Continuity is just more clutch, like if you want to suspend like a champion or something like that, which already has somewhat of an immunity to suspend because they can drop out of that suspend animation faster than non-champions. So Continuity is good there, but you can use Thread of Ascent. So like I'm using Demolitionist weapons here, right? So my Glaive has Demolitionist and my machine gun has Demolitionist, which is another way to get your grenade back faster. But it's also great because I can reload my Glaive and my machine gun with by consuming my Shackle Grenade, right? So if you don't have Demolitionist weapons, like especially if you don't have a Demolitionist Glaive, then you might want to consider, instead of Continuity, using Thread of Ascent, because then, you know, Thread of Ascent is like intrinsic Demolitionist in the way that it reloads your weapons for you. Because reloading your Glaive is a slow animation, and if you're in the middle of combat, you don't want to be stuck reloading your weapons. So just consume that Shackle Grenade, and it's reloaded for you, whether you're using Demolitionist on your weapon or you're using Thread of Ascent, right? But you don't need both. So that's why I didn't go with Thread of Ascent. But I ended up settling on Thread of Binding for a couple reasons. I'm not getting the maximum benefits from my super because I'm not using Thread of Evolution, and as you know, with Needle Storm, it puts a whole bunch of threadlings on the ground, so if you really want it to be better, then you can use Thread of Evolution. But because I didn't want to focus on threadlings here, I decided to use Thread of Binding so that my my super will actually suspend enemies, which is just plays into my Thread of Wisdom and my Thread of Warding and getting back into Glaive and stuff. So that's what I used. It also gave me plus 10 resilience, which honestly was the only reason I had 100 discipline, because I was able to sacrifice a combat mod for resilience. So I had 100 resilience, 100 discipline. If I didn't have Thread of Binding, I would have had 90 discipline. Not a game breaker by any means, but you know, it was an optional fragment, so that's what I decided to use. You could use Empowering Rift here instead of Healing Rift, because I barely used my Healing Rift, and if you want to do ranged damage, and so you have your Arcane Needle, you have your Machine Gun, you have Quicksilver Storm, you could get basically Radiant, you know, 20% extra damage from just putting down an Empowering Rift, right? So that is an option as well. What else? I'm pretty much at the end of the video here as far as the highlights go. Just going over my notes real quick to see if there's anything I missed. Stacks and Stacks and Charged Up are two of the other combat mods here that I would say are more important to use, because that's going to allow you to have 4 stacks of armor charge, which is going to give you the greatest amount of benefit from consuming your grenade. You'll get more grenade energy back, right? So some of the time I was using double grenade kickstart, and that's going to give you like 37 or 40% of your grenade back. But I ended up using firepower instead, so I just have 1 copy of kickstart, so I get like 20% of my grenade back. And then anything that dies from the Weaver's Trance suspend detonations will produce an orb of power for firepower, right? And then I can just pick up the orbs for innervation. So double grenade kickstart is not necessary, but it's definitely optional if you don't want to use firepower. But yeah, stacks on stacks plus Charged Up has that synergy where you pick up 1 orb, you get 2 stacks of armor charge. Charged Up lets you hold 4 stacks instead of 3, so that just, you know, even numbers work well with each other. You just pick up 2 orbs, you've got full stacks, right? And on top of that, if I have 4 stacks of armor charge and I'm waiting on my Weaver's Trance, I can do a finisher on an enemy and get my grenade back, which is kind of a nice workaround to all of the nerfs to grenade kickstart and all that stuff, right? So because grenade kickstart doesn't give you as much, and because you can get orbs so fast and build up armor charge, having explosive finisher is just like your secondary option to get your grenade back very fast. So that's basically what ended up working out for me here. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So as you can see here, we got 50 waves completed. Got quite a bit of materials, a couple alloys, prisms, and cores. I've never had more cores than I have right now in the game, which I'm super happy about. I've always been core poor. Now I've got like 700 cores. So yeah, good time. I ended up getting over 700 kills here. I think you'll see in the scoreboard. And produced a fair amount of orbs of power. Yeah, good time. Test out the build. Let me know what you think in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I'd greatly appreciate it. We'll see you in the next one.